Owning a home in the UK feels more like a dream than a reality for millions. Since the 1990s, house prices have escalated at a pace that significantly outstrips wage growth. This growing disparity has made home ownership increasingly unattainable for many individuals and families.
As of January 2025, the average house price in the UK reached nearly £300,000, marking a 3% rise over the past year. The UK's housing crisis has widened the generational divide. Nearly 79% of people aged 65 and over live in a home they own, with 74% owning their home outright, free from mortgage payments. In stark contrast, only 39% of 25 to 34-year-olds were homeowners in 2022, down from 57% in 1996. This disparity means that a significant portion of young adults are either renting or continuing to live with their parents well into their late 20s and early 30s. The financial strain is evident. In England, the average private renter spends approximately 34% of their household income on rent. The high cost of renting makes it incredibly difficult for young people to save for a house deposit, trapping them in a cycle of renting. Meanwhile, older generations, having benefited from more affordable housing markets in the past, have seen their property values appreciate significantly. The term generation rent encapsulates the growing concern that many young adults will never own a home of their own.
So how did we get here? To understand this, we need to look back at the history of housing in the UK.
In the aftermath of World War II, the UK faced a significant housing shortage due to wartime destruction and a rapidly growing population. The Labour government at the time, led by Prime Minister Clement Attlee, responded with an ambitious house building programme under the Housing Act of 1946. This initiative aimed to provide affordable housing for working class families, resulting in the construction of over 1 million new homes, including a large number of council houses during this period. The momentum of house building continued into the 1950s and 60s under successive governments. The Conservative government, with Harold Macmillan as Housing Minister and later Prime Minister, set a target of 300,000 homes per year, a goal that was successfully met through substantial public and private sector housing projects. By the late 1960s, home ownership was rising, and council housing accounted for approximately 30% of the UK's total housing stock. But this was about to change. The 1980s saw a major shift in housing policy under Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher's Conservative government. The introduction of the Right to Buy scheme in 1980 allowed council tenants to purchase their homes at discounted rates. While this policy promoted home ownership, it also led to a massive reduction in affordable housing stock. By 1990, 1.5 million homes had been sold under the scheme, and by 2023, that number had risen to 2.3 million. However, and crucially, the revenue from these sales was not reinvested into building new housing, leading to a steep decline in available council homes. The 1990s to the present day have seen continued reductions in the availability of affordable housing. A slowdown in construction, rising land prices, and restrictive planning laws have made it difficult to meet demand.
So why haven't we been building enough homes? Well, there are a number of reasons for this. First, we need to look at planning restrictions and the not in my backyard movement.
The foundation of the UK's modern planning system was established with the Town and Country Planning Act of 1947, which introduced comprehensive controls over land use and development. While the Act aimed to promote organised urban growth and protect green spaces, it also led to complex planning procedures that have, over time, constrained housing development. In the post-war era, as urban areas expanded, local opposition to new housing projects grew. This sentiment, often referred to as the NIMBY movement, reflects residents' resistance to developments perceived as disruptive to their communities. Concerns typically included potential strains on infrastructure, environmental degradation, and changes to local character. Such opposition has frequently resulted in delays or even cancellations of housing projects, further limiting the supply of new homes. But what about the developer's role in all this? Critics argue that restrictive planning laws are only part of the problem. Private developers, despite securing planning permissions, often delay or limit construction to keep property prices high and maximize profits. This practice, known as land banking, has worsened the housing shortage, with thousands of approved homes left unbuilt while demand continues to grow. Research shows that Britain's largest house builders collectively hold land bank plots sufficient to build over 441,000 new homes.
Next, we turn to the buy-to-let phenomenon.
The 1990s witnessed significant shifts in the UK's housing market, particularly with the rise of the buy-to-let sector. The Housing Act of 1988 was pivotal in this transformation, introducing assured short-hold tenancies and reducing rent controls. These changes made property investment more attractive, as landlords could charge market rates and had greater flexibility in tenant agreements. The subsequent availability of buy-to-let mortgages enabled more individuals to invest in residential properties. A notable consequence of this trend was that many homes sold under the Right to Buy scheme re-entered the market as private rental properties. Estimates suggest that approximately 40% of homes sold under Right to Buy are now part of the private rental sector.
And finally, we look at decades of successive government failures in implementing policy recommendations.
In 2004, under the Labour government led by Prime Minister Tony Blair and Chancellor Gordon Brown, economist Kate Barker conducted a comprehensive review of housing supply. The Barker report identified critical issues contributing to the housing shortage and recommended strategies such as increasing the rate of house building and reforming the planning system to facilitate development. A report by the Home Builders Federation in 2024 highlights that only 11 out of the 36 recommendations from the Barker report have been implemented. The research also shows that England would have 2 million more homes today if the Barker Review's most ambitious scenarios for increasing housing supply had been achieved. Key recommendations such as reforming land allocation processes, increasing incentives for local authorities to approve developments, and streamlining planning regulations have faced resistance from both local governments and community groups.
So, what are the current Labour government's plans to deal with these housing challenges?
In December 2024, the Labour government unveiled an ambitious strategy to tackle the UK's housing crisis, aiming to build 1.5 million homes by the end of the current parliament. Central to this initiative is a comprehensive overhaul of the National Planning Policy Framework, designed to expedite housing development and address long-standing supply shortages. A key component of the reform is the reinstatement of mandatory housing targets for local councils. Under the new standardised assessment of need, regions across England are assigned specific annual housing approval increases. For instance, the North East faces a 79% rise, while the North West has a 61% increase. Additionally, the reforms stress the importance of aligning new housing developments with necessary infrastructure, such as public transport, healthcare, and schools, to ensure sustainable community growth.
But what about Greenbelt land?
Well, the government acknowledges the sensitivity surrounding Greenbelt land, traditionally protected to prevent urban sprawl. However, the new framework introduces the concept of grey belt, previously developed or low environmental value areas within the Greenbelt. Development in these zones is encouraged, provided that it follows 5 golden rules, aimed at balancing housing needs with environmental preservation. Notably, there's an emphasis on delivering affordable housing with a default requirement that 50% of new homes in these areas be affordable unless specified otherwise. The proposed reforms have elicited mixed reactions. Critics argue that prioritizing housing over environmental considerations could lead to the erosion of valuable green spaces. There are also concerns about the feasibility of the ambitious targets.
We will meet that target because we can't afford not to. We have 1.3 million people waiting on housing waiting lists. There isn't a person listening to this show that will not know somebody who is desperate to get on the housing ladder. So therefore we're determined to turn that tide, whether it's the money we're putting into the Affordable Homes programme that we've announced, whether it's the changes to national planning policy, which mandatory house targets are now there for local authorities, or the upcoming bill that we're proposing on planning and infrastructure, which will really get building underway. The announcements on education and skills that our Education Minister announced around apprenticeships, which will unlock thousands more apprenticeships for our young people to go into the construction sector so we can build those homes, and I'm determined to meet that challenge.
The Labour government strategy represents one of the most significant overhauls of housing policy in decades. With ambitious targets and controversial planning reforms, the challenge now lies in whether these policies will deliver on their promises.